Now, Mr. President, today the Senate will begin consideration of the Expiring Provisions Improvement, Reform, and Efficiency Act, otherwise known as the EXPIRE Act. This legislation has so far moved forward in a cooperative, bipartisan fashion, and I'm hoping that that spirit will continue here on the floor. It seems that the new norm for tax policy around here is conducting this ritual where tax provisions expire. We wait until the following year to decide which ones to extend, and then we finally enact them into law for one retroactive year and one prospective year. When that happens, half of the benefit is more of a windfall rather than an incentive, and needless to say, this process causes great uncertainty when businesses and individuals try to manage their taxes and budgets. I'm not casting blame on anyone for this flawed methodology. Indeed, both parties share responsibility for how the tax extenders process has devolved over the years. I think the American people deserve better. I share the view of many on both sides of the aisle, including both chairmen of the tax writing committees, that comprehensive tax reform will be necessary to ensure long-term growth and prosperity in our economy. When it comes to tax policy, that type of reform should be our ultimate goal. Hopefully, if we can reform our nation's tax code, this process of extending certain provisions over and over again will come to an end. However, I'm not naive. Fundamentally, tax form, or should I say fundamental tax form, is unlikely to take place in the immediate future. That being the case, Congress needs to work to address the tax relief provisions that expired last year, or will expire by the end of this year, and we need to do so in a timely fashion. The EXPIRE Act should serve as starting point for temporarily resolving the expired and expiring tax provisions. The Senate Finance Committee voted to report the EXPIRE Act on April 3, 2014. It passed through the committee by a voice vote. Not every member supported the final bill, but the committee process was, from the outset, constructive and inclusive, and allowed for the full participation of both Democrats and Republicans, and I give the distinguished chairman a lot of credit for that. I have to commend Chairman Wyden, who conducted a fair and open debate on tax extenders during the Financial Committee markup. His approach was a prime example of how the Finance Committee is supposed to operate, and in my view, it should serve as a model for all of the Senate committees and how they should consider legislation in their various jurisdictions. The process reminds me of a historical analogy with respect to the chairman's home state of Oregon. Everyone knows about the Oregon Trail. Thousands of pioneers started in Independence, Missouri, and traveled to Independence, Oregon. They used covered wagons. In fact, the covered wagon is part of Oregon's state seal. The pioneers followed the ruts the previous wagons had cut. Like those pioneers, the chairman has taken this tax extender's wagon, following the bipartisan, inclusive ruts of the legislative trails charted by previous chairman of the Finance Committee. I hope we can stay on this trail now that the bill is on the floor. In the end, of the 55 or so tax extenders considered by the Finance Committee, only 2 were not extended. Personally, I would have preferred seeing a smaller number of extended provisions, continuing the process we started in 2012 of reducing the number of tax extenders. But in the end, the final product represented the consensus views of the committee, and I have been very pleased to work with Senator Wyden and with Chairman Wyden in the process. As I said during the markup on the EXPIRE Act, as the committee has considered this extenders package, Chairman Wyden and I have worn 2 hats. We have represented the interests of our respective states, and we've also been brokers of the diverse interests of all the members of the committee. That has meant compromise, and compromise has meant some outcomes that were likely not optimal from at least one of our perspectives. Now, with the bill coming to the floor, we are wearing a 3rd hat, representing the interests of our respective caucuses. Needless to say, this can be difficult. but it's what we have to do. When you dive into the list of these expired tax provisions, you can easily see that this package touches upon many facets of our economy, from housing to energy, and from startups to larger corporations that are important to so many industries and really important in each and every state. I was glad to see the research and development tax credit, which is so important to businesses in my home state of Utah, included in the bill that was reported out of the Finance Committee. And I know there are other provisions included in this package that are important to other states. My hope is that the floor debate on this extenders package will resemble the debate we had in the Finance Committee. That means a fair and transparent process and an opportunity for senators to offer amendments. The Senate is supposed to be the greatest deliberative body in the world. Sadly, it is difficult to call it that these days unless you're being sarcastic, and I've been pretty sarcastic about it. A number of my colleagues, led of course by our distinguished minority leader, have come to the floor in recent months to talk about the degradation of Senate rules and procedure that really has taken place under the current majority. And they've done so with good reason. On bill after bill, the process is the same. The majority leader brings a bill to the floor, immediately files cloture even though there's no desire to filibuster on our side, accuses the Republicans of filibustering, fills the amendment tree, and blocks consideration of any and all amendments. Now there's a time to fill the procedural tree, but that's only after full and fair debate. And when it's carried on too long, when the leader finally decides we've got to bring this to a close. But all too often, every time we turn around, the leader has brought the bill to the floor, filed cloture, like we're filibustering when we're not, and then fills up the parliamentary tree so we can't have amendments. Of course, those steps are usually preceded by a short-circuited committee process wherein committee consideration of the bill is either significantly abbreviated or passed entirely. Now, this is not how the Senate is supposed to operate. And with this bill, we have a chance to do things differently. As I've mentioned, the EXPIRE Act has already had full and fair consideration in the Finance Committee. The bill was drafted in consultation with all the members of the committee. I was one who helped make sure that that happened. And when we held a markup, all senators were allowed to offer amendments and receive votes on those amendments. Why not continue that process as we have in the past on the almighty floor of the United States Senate? It's ridiculous the way the minority is being treated, and I think even the majority senators are being mistreated with the way this outfit is being run right now. Now, while I'm satisfied with the way the Finance Committee handled the tax extenders package, the vast majority of senators do not serve on the Finance Committee. That being the case, most senators have not had a chance to fully debate these tax provisions or even offer amendments of their own, which they ought to have the right to do. They deserve that opportunity, and I'd expect that a number of my colleagues, particularly on the Republican side, have amendments that would improve this bill by helping to grow our economy and to create jobs. I have a number of amendments I'd like to offer myself, and over the next few days, I'll be here on the floor to talk about some of them. So, Mr. President, let's have a floor debate that's worthy of the Senate. This is not some itty-bitty bill. This is a very important bill. It can set the trend for tax reform that should come into the future. Let's allow members of both parties to offer amendments and have votes on those amendments. And let's show the American people that senators know how to work together to solve problems for American businesses and for our citizens. Too often the Senate devolves into yet another partisan sideshow where policies are placed above where politics are placed above progress. Like I said, it doesn't have to be this way. Once again, I am pleased that I've had this opportunity to work with my colleague, Chairman Wyden, to move the EXPIRE Act forward. He's done a very good job, and he deserves a lot of credit for it, and he doesn't deserve having that work stymied because people don't have a chance to offer amendments on the floor of the United States Senate. My only hope is that now that the bill is on the floor, the Senate Democratic leadership will follow his example and allow for a full and fair debate of this legislation. To be honest with you, I don't know what they're afraid of. Yes, there might be some amendments that are tough to vote on, but that's part of the process. It's part of what makes the Senate, when it functions right, the great body that it really can be. I understand the majority leader wanting to preserve his side in the upcoming elections. I think our minority leader wants to preserve his side and maybe add to it in the upcoming elections. I understand that these are important considerations, but the rights of senators on both sides ought to be considered here and ought to be given not just consideration, but given the respect that the Senate should give to each and every member of the Senate. I have to say I'm very disappointed in what's going on around here. I'm not the only one. Virtually everybody is, and I know that some are disappointed on the Democrat side as well. One of the problems is that a high percentage of the Democrat side, they've never been in the minority. They don't know what it's like to have to fight for everything you can possibly get. But they're going to be there someday, whether it's this election or some election in the future. And they're going to realize for the first time that you don't break the rules to amend the rules. Those rules are important. And frankly, they're going to realize that this should continue to be the greatest deliberative body in the world. Unfortunately, right now it is not. And it's not because of the leadership that we have in this body. We've got to make those changes. And this is a bill to start on, because this is a bill that I think everybody is interested in. It's a very important bill. It's a bill that has been labored over on the Finance Committee for quite a long time. It's taken years to get to this point, and certainly a markup that made a lot of sense. Do I support everything in this bill? No. There are some things I don't think should be in there. On the other hand, there were sincere colleagues who felt they should be in there, and they were able to prevail. And I respect that. We ought to respect both sides. Unfortunately, I think our side is being disrespected the way the Senate is being handled today. It's time to stop it. This is a bill to stop it on. This is the type of a bill that both sides have to take great interest in. This is a bill where we can set the tone for tax reform in the future. And I think it's time to wake up around here and start letting the Senate operate like the Senate should operate as the greatest deliberative body in the world. Mr. President, I yield the floor.